connecting to audio. We'll just do some introductions here and get things going. So my name is Paul Sell. I'm Associate Director here at Youth Development Oregon, and I'll be helping facilitate our conversation today around workforce development, as well as youth grants continuum of work on that. And if you are new to us, you are attending our RFA work group for the Youth Development Council on July 31st. So Melissa, if you want to go ahead and share the screen, would be great. All right. So as you can see on the screen, this is the request for application work group for the Youth Development Council for July 31st. If you are just joining us, if you wouldn't mind, please changing your title or your name in Zoom to have the attendee type, and you can see that down there if you're a Youth Development staff or a Youth Development Council member, to please use YDO. If you are a other guest or a stakeholder, please use GS. That'll just help us during the facilitation of this meeting and help make sure that everybody has an opportunity to share out. Next slide, please. In just a couple moments, Sally's going to take over with some introductions as well as kind of some general formats for the work. But our agenda for today is that introductions, and then our review of our work group structure and agreements, and then quickly our July 16th meeting recap. That's a part of the slide deck, so you can review those as needed. And then we'll jump into more of the conversation stuff, which will be around our workforce grant scope and requirements, as well as our youth grants continuum. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sally, and I'm going to go off screen just for a moment because I got to readjust my screens. Sally?
Thanks, Paul. I am Sally Deck. I am a grant manager with YDO. Melissa, if we could go to the next slide. I believe we have, there are only about 15 of us in the room. And so what we'll do is just do a quick verbal introduction. We'd love for you to turn your camera on if you're able while you introduce yourself. We'd love just to hear your name, your organization, your role, a really brief familiarity with YDO's youth grants, and that might be self-explanatory with your title as you introduce yourself. So again, I'm Sally Deck, and I am a grant manager with YDO, and I'm going to pass it to Jared.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jared Shaw. I'm a grant manager and workforce analyst with YDO, and I will pass it to Abraham.
Hello, everybody. I'm Abraham Magana with YDO, and I'm a grant manager and operations analyst. I'll go ahead and pass it to Cord.
Hey, everybody. Cord Bucher, Deputy Director for Youth Development. Paul, should I pass it back to you, or you've already introduced yourself, I assume? I'm looking at who's next on my screen here. I'll pass it to the next person. I see Brian Baird.
Brian Baird, I'm the director of the Coos County Juvenile Department. My familiarity with YDO grants and formulas RFP is part of the reason I'm here today, is to gather more information. On my screen, there is no one speaking that hasn't already been introduced, so I'm going to mute myself and let the group roll forward.
Great. Actually, if we could just, let's do the rest of the YDO staff, and then we'll get to the rest of our guests. Lawrence, could I have you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lawrence White. I am the Racial and Ethnic Disparity Coordinator with YDO. And with that, I guess I will pass it on to the audience. How about Katrina Macaroro?
Yeah, if Katrina's not ready to go, I see Gail Anderson is next up.
Hello, my name is Gail Anderson, and I'm with Project Lemonade, a nonprofit in Portland, and we serve youth in foster care in a variety of different ways, including, just in a variety of ways. And we're very interested in hearing if we have alignment with your organization, if there's opportunity for us.
Awesome. I don't want to miss the rest of our staff. So Melissa, if you'd introduce yourself, it'd be great.
Sure, thanks. Melissa Gallardo with Youth Development Oregon. And my role is executive support specialist for the division and administrator for the council. And fairly familiar with YDO's grant process and youth grants and RFA process, which is a great segue to pass it to Tanasia. If you can introduce yourself, Tanasia.
Thanks, Melissa. Hi, my name is Tanasia Bishop. I am the Youth Grant Administrative Specialist. And as Melissa stated, I'm pretty familiar too, but I'm still learning as we go. Sally, I'm going to pass it back to you.
Yeah. Next up on my screen is Fallon.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Fallon Stewart. I am with the Maslow Project here in Southern Oregon, and we serve homeless youth and families. And I am a program support specialist. And everyone on my screen has already gone. I'm so sorry.
No, that's
Could
fine.
you call out the next person? Thank you.
Katrina, I saw you pop your camera on. I don't know if you could introduce yourself. That'd be great.
Yeah, I can go now. My name is Katrina Machoro. I'm here today as a guest. I'm with the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, and I am a grant manager, and I am familiar with YDO because we also do Future Ready Oregon funds. We have some shared grantees.
Awesome. And it looks like we also have Hillary, another HEC person.
I can't hear Hillary, but you're not muted. So something's going on with your audio.
Heck, computers, man. They're just,
I know.
the audio's not working today.
Wait, now we can hear you, I think.
Now you can hear me. Okay,
Yes.
great. I'm Hillary Blackstone. I'm also with the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, and I'm a youth program specialist with the Office of Workforce Investments. And again, just a similar agency partner to YDO and their work. And there's some crossover sometimes in who is funded between us. So wanted to attend.
We are so
Thanks
glad
for
to have
being
you.
here.
So glad to have you. Janelle, if you don't mind coming off camera and introducing yourself, that'd be great.
Yep, I'm Janelle Theobald, and I'm on the Development Council. I'm pretty familiar with the grants. I was a grant reviewer last year, so I've read a bunch of rubrics, but I'm not too familiar with how, you came up with those rubrics. So, yeah.
Awesome. We're so glad to have you. Allison, you're up next for us.
Hi, everybody. My name is Allison, and I'm with the Boys and Girls Clubs of the Rogue Valley in Southern Oregon. I am brand new in my role. This is my third week, but I do have some experience with YDO grant funding in the past in other positions. But since I'm new here, I thought I would join again from this role.
Great. And then the last person I show on the screen is Derek. I can't hear you, Derek.
Oh, okay. Hello, I'm Derek Thompson, co-director of Leaders Become Legends. We're mentoring organization where we mentor young men and women through mental health and also get them involved in clean energy jobs as well, help them through that process.
Awesome. Alrighty. Melissa, if you don't mind going back to sharing the screen, and then, yeah, that's our next slide. So thank you all for your introductions. I really appreciate that we've got a great mix of people here, and I think that we'll have a vibrant conversation. Our structure for this work group is that this is an ongoing series of meetings that work as essentially touch points for both our Youth Development Council and other stakeholders to be able to talk about the 2025 to 2027 RFA components. So that RFA won't get written for some time, and that's why we were able to have this dialogue now so that we can keep the process moving forward while also incorporating the thoughts, the ideas, and the feedback that we're getting from the community and from the variety of stakeholders that we have. Part of that work really is around increasing the transparency about our funding and about our scope and about how we develop the RFA and what goes into it. Next slide, please. We have a handful of agreements, just as how this group and how these meetings function, and that's that we have an agenda topic today. So today we're talking about the Workforce Development RFA, and the conversation today will just be focused on that agenda item. And we are using our 25-27 RFA continuous improvement areas and our YDO equity lens to guide our conversations. We ask that YDC members and invited participants have priority during discussions, also creating opportunity using the chat, and also these conversations are ongoing, so don't hesitate to reach out to us if we don't have time to get to all of your ideas today. We ask that folks stay muted until they're called on and to turn their camera on while they're speaking if they're able to. And also we ask that folks stay committed for our allotted time for the share outs and stay committed to kind of our timeline for this meeting so that we can get through the content that we need to get through and have time and space to include all of the conversations that we want to get to be sure we invite the community into. Next slide, please. As a quick recap, our first meeting was in June, or rather maybe that was the first meeting that had real content was June 28th. And what we created at that point was this visual that you can see, this framework that the 25-27 grants include community investment grants, re-engagement grants, and then workforce development. And we'll talk later about the continuum of those grants and how they are connected and rely on each other and how that works. And we also talked a little bit about the structure, goals, and agreements of the work group. Next slide, please. Earlier this month, we had a great conversation about the re-engagement opportunity grants and the community investment grants. We have a handful of considerations or updates that are under consideration. Things like requiring a little bit more collaboration, and so increasing letters of reference and support, creating a little bit more of structure and detail to our outreach services plan and to the partnerships that would exist between education and workforce providers within the re-engagement grants. And likewise, within the community investment grants, some updates around really defining what a grantee will do, and then using that information in their application to be able to determine possible funding amounts and some other factors like that. So if you have questions about that, we can go into greater detail offline about that. Again, we want to ensure that there are opportunities for people to ask questions and to be engaged in the conversations. Also, these meetings are set up with the intention that people can pop in and out, and that when there's a topic that's really of great concern to you or you're really excited about it, that you can come to that one without being obligated to come to the other meetings. And I think that, Paul, I'm going to pass it back to you. Melissa, if you could advance to the next slide.
Thank you, Sally. And for those of you that may not have chat open, Melissa put in there a couple links for you to access both our published work group documents. So it does include all of the slide decks from the previous meetings in that published work group document folder, as well as recordings from the past meetings. In case something sparked your interest in those quick reviews that Sally did, you can go back and visit that on that side. So our main topic for today is around workforce development and that separate RFA. And as Sally indicated in our in the quick summary, is that workforce kind of lived in two places prior bienniums. And so this last biennium, it lived within an initiative under our community investment grants. We've made the decision to move that out of that grant or that RFA process. And create its own separate one, as well as Future Ready. So we have folks here from HEC, which appreciate you being on the call. And I believe maybe many of you already know that the Future Ready funds are sunsetting at the end of this biennium. And so it is something that we are working on as an agency. Actually, I think both agencies are working on that. So currently, our workforce development RFA, and I would say one of the things I think that at least Sally and I took away from this, and I think our whole team, as we've dove into these requirements of the workforce development RFA, we've recognized maybe it's less about workforce development specifically and more about youth job readiness and career development services and work that we're doing. And so keep that kind of in mind as we go through these requirements. And those of you that are new on our on this this work. I'll go through about, I think, 3 or 4 slides, just kind of giving some detail, and then we'll pause and have a conversation around the slides that we shared out within that. So our workforce development RFA currently would be governed by the current or the same ORSs and OARs that our community investment grants are governed by. Unless other legislation passed, there are some different bills that are looking that may hit the legislature this winter. And so we have to kind of plan for that unknown. But overall, currently our focus around workforce development is to deliver job readiness and career development services to out-of-school youth, unemployed or underemployed youth, as well as re-engaged youth. So that connection back to re-engagement, which we talked about last time. And it supports youth ages 14 through 24 around youth development concepts to increase that access and training and placement into livable wage jobs. Also important to note, those eligible entities that would remain the same as community investments. And so we covered those the last time. That is also governed by our ORSs and OARs on that. Next slide, please. When we look at the goals for our workforce development within Youth Development Oregon, there's kind of three main things that come to mind: reduce disparities and remove barriers to education and workforce success. And you'll see us call that as youth, and really focused on youth furthest from opportunity. And so we recognize that by supporting youth that are furthest from opportunity in both removing and reducing those disparities in educational workforce, they can find greater success, as well as support all youth along the way. That second bullet there is prioritize the development of youth and the transitions from school to job to career. And so we recognize, and I think through the development of these goals, recognize that helping youth in those transitions may look different than adults, right? And so focusing on those youth development practices that are important to help youth be successful. And then that third one, provide pre-employment, on-the-job training and or employment coaching. We want our youth to be successful when they hit the workforce. And so how do we provide that piece is really a critical element. And then also there's always additional supports that we have included within our grant. So that academic support to promote high school completion, recognizing that youth really need to make sure that they have that high school completion to at least at minimum to be the most successful in the workforce. Culturally specific programming is an important element of our work. Workforce reentry services. So obviously that just involved youth is a critical element of youth development focus in all of our grants. And then also one-on-one career coaching. We want youth to be able to thrive once they get to those careers. And so how do we get those supports along the way? So when we look at the RFA, so next slide, please. We really have 3 primary requirements that we would see as what we're considering as part of this RFA. The first would be that education and workforce partnerships. This mirrors what we have in re-engagement as well. So education applicants have to have workforce partnership. Workforce applicants would need to have an education partnership to make sure that focus on education and education completion is there for that support. The other one that we have seen very successful that we feel is a very important requirement is that you'd be able to provide essential employability skills training. So not just those basic, like, hey, this is what it looks like to be in a job, but really around getting youth the tools to be successful in employment. So that solution mindset, self-awareness, cultural competency in the workplace, but then also like, how do you resolve conflict? How do you change your jobs, right? And providing that curriculum as it would be an important element and a requirement of these grants. And the third then is that connection to the workplace. So that paid work experience, or it could be an apprenticeship, pre-apprenticeship, internship, right? Those terms are sometimes used interchangeably, so those would be defined in the RFA. But then also access to industry recognized credentials. So some of our workforce programming really can provide those industry recognized credentials that will give a youth a leg up as they go into employment. Next slide, please. So when we think about what we're proposing with this workforce development RFA, there's a couple critical components we would want applicants to be aware of. Is that they would need an established connection and access to employers in the community, educational services, that re-engagement and workforce service providers. So again, connection to the re-engagement grantees that we do serve, and then also wraparound and direct support services for youth. So how do we support youth that are experiencing homelessness, for example? They would want to be able to address that and support those needs. The other critical components would be a youth-centered curriculum and delivery of essential employability skills, as well as job and career readiness skills. And then the third, which we just want to be very transparent of, that applicants in this with YDO would have to participate in the re-engagement and workforce convening. So those are biannual convenings that folks come together to talk about how to expand service for youth across the dedicated zone. And then a couple things to note that we would not anticipate paying for within these grants would be tuition at a four-year college, as well as standalone events. We do have pretty robust reporting requirements that would be associated with these grants. So standalone events would be more difficult to do than that. And then a couple that we've seen, and these are been kind of interchangeable within our grant making in the past. So that career exploration and exposure programming, that would really fit more in the community investment grants, right? So defining where those folks would want to apply. That also includes the entrepreneurship programming and curriculum for in that work. So I'm going to hit pause there for a second. That was a lot. That was like the largest presentation phrase we've had. So actually out of breath, that's not good. But I'm going to pause and have Melissa go to the next slide. And Sally, if you don't mind, I'll maybe turn it over to you for calling on people if they have questions. I see a couple things in chat.
Yeah. Hillary asked the question, what are the defined zones for the workforce convenings? And actually, I wonder if we should go back a slide just so that we have a visual on that. So what we have right now is that our grantees who have re-engagement, future ready or workforce grants, they are required to attend convenings with other grantees. And so we have 4 zones across the state. And so we have a zone that's the Portland metro area. We have a zone that is roughly the mid-Willamette Valley, middle of the state out to the coast. We have a Southern Oregon zone, and then we have Central Oregon and Eastern Oregon as the 4th zone. And so what we have had so far is a series of convenings where folks have come together to be able to have conversations. Oh, I see that Brian just joined. Brian, when you have a chance to turn your camera on, we'll have you say hi and introduce yourself. There's Brian giving a wave. Thank you. So the zones were in part, the zones were decided, the size and shape of the zones were decided based on where we have grantees. And so that is why the metro area is fairly small geographically, because it is a little bit more densely populated with people and grantees. And those convenings we have found to be really helpful. And so I realize now that it says that it's a critical component for applicants to participate, but it's actually just that the applicants need to be prepared that if they are awarded the grant, that they will be required to participate in the convenings. So you don't have to pre-participate in order to apply. You do need, if you are awarded the grant, to attend the convenings that are in your zone. And those are held up about every 6 months. So about twice a year, we are having these events. I see another.
See a thumbs up from Hillary. I did see Brian come back on screen. I don't. Did you have a question or a thought that you wanted to share? This now is the time. So we want to open it up for dialogue as folks.
Just saying hello. Appreciate the time and effort by the team and attendees. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry I was a little late, but just here. I knew everybody's doing great. But yeah, good to get other questions and thoughts into the space. So thanks for being here.
Thanks, Brian. Melissa also just put the questions from the slide into the chat, and we really welcome folks' thoughts on those bullet points that are in the chat there, particularly around kind of the focus of workforce. If folks have questions about youth demographics, a specific demographic they hope to serve, or what that might look like. If folks have questions about excluded activities, we'd love to have a conversation.
Feel free to come on camera and come off mute too. We actually don't have any invited participants, and we have, believe we have one council member. So just want to open it up for the floor. Cord?
Yeah, I'll ask a question that I think I know the answer to. We've kind of discussed this in general ways internally, but I know this has been evolving, so I might ask it here. Is the current vision that when there are RFAs, this will be a separate RFA from community investments, and that if a program seeks to do workforce services, this is the place where that would be eligible, and that workforce programming rather, should not be done with community investment funds. So the idea is, if you're doing workforce programming, and it's not re-engagement with workforce programming, but specifically workforce training, that this is the route that an application would need to take. Is that still the thinking, and is that correct?
Yes, and I appreciate that point, Cord. And actually, I'm realizing now maybe we could have started with the continuum, might have helped lay out that point. But yes, so the idea is, so we have 2 workforce strands of funding right now in this biennium, and we're trying to pull it all together into this RFA. We're still determining when those will be released and what that will look like. But if you are providing these services for youth around getting them connected and having the skills to enter the job and career is really where we want to focus on it. And so if we went back to those excluded activities, one of the things that part of the reason some of those activities that we put in for this RFA that would say were excluded is because they tend to fall more in like a after school programming or just a really kind of exposure programming that maybe middle school students or young high school students access. And so that's where that would fall into the CI. So if you're focused in on serving youth that are underemployed, unemployed, out of school, and or re-engaged youth, that's really, we want to have people focus in on these funds, because the reporting will be specific to it, as well as really the supports that grant manager will provide to that work. Sally, did you have anything to add? I kind of jumped in there.
I don't think so. I mean, those who can even whether you're familiar with this or not, I'm sure you can guess that we have a lot that we could say about this. We could spend hours, and it was our intention that we would give a really brief, high-level overview and invite conversation about that, and also recognizing that the Future Ready legislation came in the middle of a biennium and as a bit of a surprise, and then had an RFA that was written specific to that legislation. So we have to have some flexibility around the unknown and the uncertainty of what the next legislative session might include. But our intention is that we will have some solid parameters around the youth that we intend to serve with the workforce programs, and that those youth are the out of school youth, the youth who are either unemployed or underemployed, and that we would define underemployed as those who are in survival jobs or jobs that don't show promise that they could lift someone out of poverty. And then the other group of youth we intend to serve with the workforce funds are those who are in a re-engagement program. So really focusing on the youth that are furthest from opportunity and wanting to ensure that they have the greatest chances at developing job and career readiness, both having the opportunity to learn the essential employability skills, and then also the skills that are specific for the job that they want to get to have.
And I see Hillary put a question in the chat as well. So, so we are looking at what the options are within the legislature of that work. Cord, I don't know if you have the chat open. You might be able to. I don't know if you want to provide more detail within that.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about this. So the question in the chat is whether we are going to submit a POP, which for those who aren't familiar, is a policy option package. Is when an agency asks for new funding in an upcoming legislative session. So can we submit a POP for additional funding? She says independently, or are we looking to tie that to HEC's Future Ready funding request? Well, I mean, as I understand it, now I probably should take care, because I don't know what I know that I'm not supposed to know and what I know that I'm allowed to know and can say publicly. My understanding is that HEC does have federal funds that will still be available for Future Ready, for use for Future Ready programs in the next biennium. If anyone from HEC wants to add and some expand on that, please do. I don't know the status of any additional general funds, like, so this would be new state money for Future Ready for HEC. We did independently submit a POP. Currently, that is not one that is likely to move forward. So I do not currently, I mean, just things can change, but I don't expect that we're going to get additional general fund dollars specifically for the purpose of sustaining Future Ready youth programs. That isn't to say there might not be other ways that additional funding comes to YDO, or that there are other initiatives, even workforce related, that might emerge. But as far as POP for funding Future Ready with general fund dollars, now that our federal money has run out or will have run out, we did put that idea forward, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So I think that our sort of like just qualifying, our plans with the possibility things can change, is that we don't yet have, we haven't seen the ODE agency recommended budget. There's still a governor's budget to come. There's still legislative session to come. A lot can happen. But right now we are planning for a workforce grant that is going to be utilizing existing current service level funds, similar to our workforce readiness grants that have historically been part of the community investments. So that, I hope, is kind of a complete answer to that question without revealing too much.
Thank you, Cord. Appreciate that. And Hillary, yeah, please don't feel like you have to limit your questions other than time-wise, but we do want to make sure that other folks, if you're on the call, have questions or thoughts around what we're currently looking at for these workforce grants. And I think Cord said it really well, in that we do have some general funds that we have utilized in prior bienniums for the workforce readiness initiative as part of our community investment grants. That's why you see it tied to that legislation, because it would, as it currently stands, it would fit under that same work that we would move forward with on that funding model, just separate RFA or request for application versus all combined together.
A note on that separation of RFAs. One of the things that we really are hoping to do with a separate workforce RFA, assuming that it's the same pool of community investment funds and not a new pool of funds. One of our hopes with separating the RFAs is to allow for basically a cleaner review of the applicants and a protection of the workforce RFAs and those applicants from the re-engagement applicants, from the community investment applicants. And that is because our community investment grants can serve ages 6 to 24. And what we want is for the workforce development grants to truly be in their own competitive space and not be competing for the same pool of funds as an elementary school after school program. That we see the need for both of those, and we want to be able to protect the competitive nature of the different types of grants that we offer. Paul, do you want to add to that?
I think you said that very well in that, and one of the things that we saw in having things combined, it was hard to expect the data and really represent what kind of data collection tools were needed. And so workforce obviously is going to probably have different data collection needs than a third grade after school programming focused on helping youth find success in that level. And so we want to make sure that we really are able to do it. And Cord, I just thought you gave Sally a thumbs up. I actually didn't know you did it on purpose, so I'll give you that. All right, other questions, but I think Sally, you led us right into kind of that next continuum slide. I'm not seeing anybody raise hands or got questions on it. So Melissa, maybe if you want to bring back the slide deck would be great. And so if you want to hit the next slide would be great. Actually, next two slides. All right. So when we talk about the youth grants continuum, and youth grants is a term that we use at the agency of encompassing all of our competitive grants focused on youth development services. And so currently that our youth grants continuum includes our community investment grants, re-engagement grants, and future ready grants. What we're looking at for the 25-27 biennium is that we will have funds dedicated to our community investment grants, and that serves the broadest age range from 6 to 24. It's the entire age range that our agency serves. It's really focused on providing that positive youth development activities and programming, really just the good services for youth, right? At a variety of ages, after school programming, sometimes in school programming or out of school time programs, as well as that would also include some of our youth violence and gang prevention funds focused on really helping support youth avoid involvement in gangs and violent activities. And that funding and programming is really open to all youth, with prioritizing youth furthest from opportunity to access that work. So we want to reduce those barriers, reduce those disparities that youth see across all ages and across all youth. When we look at, and so if you're doing just really solid youth service program, youth development programs and activities, that's where the community investment grants really will lend, and we want folks to focus on. The more specific grants that we have are our re-engagement opportunity grants, and that serves a smaller age range of 14 through 24. And the big piece about re-engagement opportunity grants is it's focused on education completion and post-secondary transition. And so there is an educational component or educational access component to those grants that grantees have to have, either through direct service or through partnership within that work. And it also then has defined eligible youth per the ORSs and the OARs that oversee the re-engagement funds. And so that funding and programming has to be focused on eligible youth. And then when we think of that continuum, we move then into our workforce grants, which includes our re-engagement opportunity youth, and youth that are eligible youth through that context. But again, it broadens back out to serve that same age range from 14 to 24, but focuses on job and career readiness services. And so when we think about what the priorities are in those fundings and those programming, that's really around out of school youth, youth that are underemployed or unemployed at the time, and youth that have gone through the re-engagement services. And when I think about the workforce development grants, one of the things that we're seeing is that strength being built through these re-engagement and workforce convenings, that there's this partnership that forms around helping youth that want to access workforce training but still don't maybe have the high school completion work. So that goes back to those re-engagement opportunity grants, and then vice versa. As youth find success in high school completion, they need that next option around job and career readiness. And so that's where those workforce partners come in. So it's kind of a layered approach within it. And our hope and our goal with defining a continuum across our youth grants is that grantees or applicants, can find their way to the proper funding source. So one, the data aligns better with what they're doing, as well as then they get the technical assistance and support through our grant managers and the work that we do through our convenings within that element. So I'm going to pause there before we go to questions. And Sally, did I miss anything in that? Or you want anything to add?
I think the only other thing to add, and this is just because this is a phrase that we have used a lot, is tying that for us, the re-engagement opportunity grants and the workforce development grants can have so many opportunities to be closely tied together. And that what we see is that the youth for whom it is difficult to complete high school, it is also difficult for them to figure out what comes next, to figure out what training or education might come next, or what job is going to come next. And that's where we really see this interplay between our re-engagement programs and our workforce development programs. And so by prioritizing and focusing on youth who are out of school, re-engaged, unemployed, underemployed, that what we're really looking at are those youth for whom finishing high school is hard. Maybe they did successfully finish high school, but just barely, or they had a really rough time, and that they need those additional wraparound supports, guidance, job coaching, resume writing, interview help, or they've landed themselves in a low-paying minimum wage job that doesn't have opportunities for advancement, and they don't know how to change jobs. They don't know how to get the next job. They maybe don't know what they don't know about gracefully leaving a job and being able to get a letter of recommendation or a reference to be able to then get the next job. Those are the youth we're really looking to focus on with the workforce development grants.
Awesome. Thank you. So with that, Melissa, we do have a couple questions, or a couple kind of bullet points to consider as we open it up to groups. So if you want to go to the next slide, and then putting it in the chat was awesome, by the way. I appreciated that too. So I want to open up the discussion. If people have thoughts or questions about the youth grants continuum, around how that alignment and outline of those services go, or just some additional thoughts or updates that you think might be needed within that work. Yeah. I'd also open it up to the other YDO grant managers if you have some thoughts that you want to put out there with with what we presented today. I know you guys saw a lot of this yesterday, and we had conversations with it, but if we miss something, please feel free to come off mute. All right. All right. Well, that was our planned agenda. We do try to make sure that we carve out enough time. I'm stalling a little bit in case people are thinking of questions, but we do try to carve out enough time for it. And actually, Melissa took down the slide deck. So we do have another meeting coming up later this month, I believe, that will again focus on these conversations around the RFA. If you go into the public folder, it does kind of outline some general concepts of what each month is going to cover within our work. So actually, I guess today's the 31st, so it's next month technically, right? I should probably do that. And Corda, you just give me a high five, or you raising your hand? Sorry, couldn't resist after the thumbs up. But
bit of both. It's a high five, but also I kind of want to maybe throw out one more question that will hopefully maybe get someone to chime in. I'd love to know if there's anything, particularly for our guests who are trying to find out about programming, who maybe are or have been recipients of funding for workforce or other things at YDD. Is there something that you have not heard us talk about today in terms of workforce grants that like you're trying to do or curious about like doing? I mean, is there something that we haven't touched on that you were hoping to learn more about? This question is also maybe for our friends at HEC. If there's something that you have, as you're hearing this, we've talked often and before about how we want to try to align what we're funding and areas where we can be complementary. So just, is there anything that we haven't addressed in this presentation that folks wanted to ask about or hear more about?
I mean, feel free to come off mute if you have one, or put it in chat and we can put it into the space.
I have a question. This is Gail from Project Lemonade.
Hi.
I don't know if I'm an invited guest or.
Oh, you're totally fine. We are.
Group here.
Yep.
So I don't know how many of you are familiar with any of the work that we do, but one of I think where we align in what you're sharing today is we have a part of our work includes hiring youth in our organization who have lived experience in foster care. We have 12-week paid internships, and a part of our model is that we do hire interns with lived experience. They, as a part of their job, support the youth that we serve in the work that we do. But part of our work also includes, doing deep dives on, what does life after high school look like for you? What instead of us doing, we've been doing this paid internship since 2016, but our model originally started out with partnerships where we would kind of like force these kids to go like, hey, we're going to go over here and learn about this job and that job. But we've switched our model to really say, what are you interested in, or what piques your interest in, kind of doing it more specific to each of our interns, as well as other things, resume writing. And we have kind of a basic needs fund that comes with this internship program. And I guess sort of what I had a question about is, does the grant program have an opportunity to include wages for the interns that we hire? And another one is, we talked a little, or I heard you mention about partnerships. Would that mean that we would have to, if we were interested in applying, have employers on board who then would employ our youth once they finished with the paid internship? Is that what you mean by like the partnerships?
Sally, you want to touch on that, or
Yeah,
you want me to?
You raise a really good question. So yes, and to all of that. As far as actual wages paid to youth, yes. One of the models that we've seen be really successful is when grantees are well established with employers in the community, and they are able to place the youth with that employer, and then the employer is actually the one paying the wages, and that just allows the grant dollars to go farther. And we've seen that across the state, that has worked well. And then the part of the grant is creating that additional support. So helping the youth get the job, helping them after a shift unpack like what happened, and that sort of interaction. So placing youth outside of your organization with an employer who's paying the wages is a great model. Also, we have some organizations where they have like a robust coffee shop program, or something like that, where they're training the youth in a cohort model to go through some number of weeks, maybe doing some kind of behind the scenes tasks. And then after they finish that, they graduate into like making coffee at the coffee shop. And so those youth are employed within the organization that receives the grant. And that works for the organizations that are big enough to be able to do that. And there is an organization that has kind of an internship model where the youth are paid with the grant dollars to work at the grantee organization doing peer-to-peer support. And if that is that's appropriate for the youth you're serving, then there's space for that to be a good fit. What we're hoping for also is that this is kind of a launch pad, that youth are gaining work experience through these grants, that they're then well equipped to have another job elsewhere. So that would be my only concern about youth staying within the program. If it's the program where they are receiving a lot of support and care, for them also to be receiving wages there just needs to be clarified, would be another way to say it. So yes, I think there is possibility for that. And also that as the RFA develops, there will be more opportunities to ask more refined questions about where exactly your program could fit in that. Cord, I'll pass it to you.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure, because I think the way I heard the second part of the question was from Gail, is you asked whether whether partnerships with employers would be a requirement, if that's something that we're contemplating when we talk about partnerships. And if I understand it correctly, not necessarily. That if you are say an educational organization, like you're a school applying for a workforce grant, you would need to have a partner who could provide workforce services. So that could be a training organization like yours. That could be an employer outside who says, we'll hire youth and give them work opportunities. But if I understand what we have in our slide deck correctly, if you're a workforce program, so you're providing the training, you're providing paid work experience, what we're looking for then is that there is that there is some educational partnership, that there's, because in many cases, there might be youth who come to you for employment services who are also, as it turns out, in need of educational supports. So how will those be accessible? But I don't believe that what we're requiring or planning, contemplating requiring, is that you have private employers lined up to hire youth. That's great if that happens. I think, Sally, you've kind of named like there's a value to that, but I don't think, unless I'm misreading stuff or I've misunderstood something, that is a requirement. Is that correct, Sally?
Yeah, I would say that, and I think one of the pieces that we put in for connection to employers is kind of what Sally's alluding to, is that it's not just kind of this one-stop piece that youth have access to, and we can do some more soft handoffs or transitions or suggestions of youth to go find. But and those requirements are met through letters of support is typically how we've done it in the past, where you would go out and ask. So if being a workforce provider, you'd work with an education provider to say, hey, we have this partnership and acknowledgement of being able to help support a youth that may not have education, right? Or then they support you in that work. So it's initial work, and then it'll kind of evolve to what makes sense for your organization, and we want to make sure that we have it flexible enough to support that. And Gail, you got 3 of us, which is impressive. So did we answer your question at some point, or do you have some clarifications that you'd like us to do?
No, that was very clear. It was definitely about the workforce partnerships, the obligation for us to, once we've had our interns, we do the paid internships, that we have a responsibility to assure the next employer and have those employers in place, because every youth will, while we definitely have those, and we've been nurturing those since 2016, some of the youth we have may want to go spin in a completely different direction with their next job.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that was very clear. Thank you for all of that.
Absolutely. And I think one of the exciting pieces is we're starting to see that connection, and just that informal even connection that has happened within the re-engagement and workforce convenings is exciting, because if you know somebody that a youth is interested in this that might not be the work you do, is wonderful to have that connection, and we want to encourage and support it for sure. Other questions from the group? Again, we don't have to, the nice part about a work group is we do not have to keep online until 2 o'clock. So if people don't have questions, we get to, I like saying that. I think I said that every time we've done this work group, because it's nice. All right.
Apologies. This is Brian.
No
I can't figure out where to raise my hand at. But
no worries. No worries.
So I just have a question. So if you're going to look at, I heard that you guys talk about how things are broken down geographically. Let me turn my camera. Broken down geographically into regions. So for example, I'm in the southern region. And while I very much like Lane County and Jackson County, I can assure you I have nothing in common with them as far as resources, services, and those sorts of things.
Right.
So are you guys going to be able to provide examples of, for small, medium, and large counties, a model program that you think that works well? Because if you tell me like this program that works great in downtown Portland, I can't replicate that. That does absolutely nothing for me. And it feels like when I come to these meetings, we talk about this at this higher level, which is great. But when we start to talk about the medium-sized counties, which technically I am, until you get to the geographical isolation and there's resources, and then I relate much more to the isolated Eastern Oregon counties. So I just want to make sure that's going to be taken into consideration.
Yes, that's a great question. So in our past RFAs, we've run regional awards. And so we have the state divided up into 11 regions specifically. And it's actually done less about in the application process, but more in the awarding process that we use those regions. And so I knew I was regional solutions is the regional map that we use to outline that. And in our awarding process, so it goes through the scoring competitive process, and then the last RFA is that top ranked person in that region is automatically awarded before it goes to a statewide ranking. So we try to accommodate for different levels of support within that. To answer your question specifically about examples, that is one of the things that I think as a team we need to wrestle with more of, like, how do we provide some really solid examples from different locations around the state to help guide new applicants into the process. So I want to acknowledge and appreciate the question. I honestly don't. It's work that I want to take back to the team for us to wrestle. Part of the reason why we have this group is that I think you're highlighting a really important question for us of, can we give some of those examples?
And I just want to be honest about is it worth applying for something on the local, small here locally, if I'm going to have a school district that's local that's going to come in and scoop it up, but even my local school districts can't compete at all with Lane County and Jackson. I mean, complete waste of time for us to even, there's no one even on this call from my region, just to give you an indication of where I believe our region feels like their voices in this. I think if it's attainable, it's doable, but we can't compete. We can't even compete with the larger counties in our region. Forget about Portland, Salem, those areas. So that's why I ask about if someone replicates. So for example, if there a program in Klamath County, which is my sister county, rural, isolated, federally recognized tribes, geographically isolated, most people live in one area. That kind of makes sense to me to look at something that's similar. I would just greatly appreciate it if there could be not just this is your region and these are the programs that work. And thank you for some of those programs. I'm going to use Deschutes County. Deschutes County is a 10. They got all kinds of stuff, but they also have a lot of money, a lot of resources, a lot of time, but then if you go to Wheeler, Crook, a bunch of those, again, none of those are going to compete with Deschutes County because they can't. So anyway, I will stop with that. I just wanted to see if this was just going to be a regional thing where it's going to get scooped up by a few counties, or if a medium or small isolated county actually stands any hope in pulling down some of this money.
Very good question. And I think I appreciate the grant managers on the call, because I think that's something, your point is really important for us to wrestle with on how we can address that. And I made the connection. I also want to point out, I just made the connection of Douglas and Coos in the regional solutions. So I appreciate that clarification too. Sally or Cord, did you have something to add?
So the RFA that we're talking about, the awards will be, hopefully we'll have an intent to award in July of next year. So we're still very early in the process. So there's plenty of time for you to learn more, to discern whether or not this could be a good fit for you or worth your time to apply for. In the meantime, fellow grant manager Abe has been working on a really excellent interactive map that would give you an idea of where across the state we currently have awards, and it gives you an opportunity. And I don't believe that it is ready yet, but certainly it will be ready and released prior to these RFAs being released, and would give you an opportunity to see like who have we funded in the past, and then that may help you make some decisions about if you think that you could be competitive in that arena, right? That if we were that if there were such a thing as the all-stars of community-based organizations, local government, etc., we aren't funding only the all-stars. And so from my perspective, when a well-written grant application comes in, the reviewers note that, and they're able to say, wow, this is a really cool program in an area that clearly needs these services. And that is a way, in fact, that some of the more isolated rural organizations are funded. And there are a lot of Portland Metro organizations that are not funded. And that to some extent that is because of the demographic they're aiming to serve. So yes, we do fund small counties. We do fund isolated counties. And so then it's a question of kind of which of the grants you might want to apply for the program you're hoping to run and the youth you are hoping to serve.
I was going to say, I just put in a link, and I think there's another link there with the Regional Solutions Map, but there's a link to our page, our research data information page, which contains some of the maps, which is an interactive map of all our, for the 23-25 cycle, awarded grants. And it gives you a little bit of a summary of each grant. So you may want to look at some of the smaller communities and more rural areas and see what they funded. And it'll give you an idea of kind of what kind of programming and what they applied for as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to find a good link to the map, and all the ones I'm finding are not that helpful, but it is, you know, I think
posted the Regional Solutions map.
Oh, I thought I saw the one for, oh, you got it. Okay, great. Super.
Awesome.
Well, I just put a summary then just to note that, you know, so for example, for regional awards, Coos County wouldn't be competing with Deschutes or Portland, but, you know, it would just be in that instance, Coos, Douglas, and Curry, as I think Paul noted. And this is just, so there's different ways we slice regions. So that's just for when you're looking at awards.
But again, I'd like to go back and note, when we talk about Coos and Curry County, Douglas County has probably twice the population than the other two combined. And we start to talk about applications and how they're submitted. I'm a department of 4 people, 4. So I deal with other entities that are applying for these grants, and they have whole teams that are submitting these grants and writing them for us. I would just like to point out, in an equity lens, a lot of us smaller counties, we don't have that. We don't have entire grant writers that are gathering data, or Jackson County, who's hiring an outside consultant to come in for tens of thousands of dollars to write that grant. Like, some of us don't have that ability. And when we talk about equity, I think it's important that this group also recognizes that we don't all have those resources readily available. So, that, not to be
Thank you.
critical
Yeah,
about that,
thank you.
I just think that's something that is overlooked every time we have grants that come out. And that's why I think you have medium and small counties that we quit attending these meetings, and we stop applying because it's not successful for us.
No, and that, well noted. I appreciate that. Appreciate that. Other questions or thoughts? All right. Well, with that, I am gonna go ahead and move us forward and close out the meeting. Again, appreciate everybody joining us. Because this process is happening all the time, and we do not have RFAs open, we are available. And so I would encourage, like, if you have things you want to connect offline or have ideas that you'd like to just share with us, it is important. And my information and contact, I believe, is out there on the web for sure on that. And I know Brian, I don't know if you have any. Perfect. There we go. It's not included in the slide deck, which so I just noticed our information is not. Yeah, we will add that in the slide decks. Whoops, totally forgot about that. But we will add that as well as we're moving things forward. Brian Detman, did you have anything to close us out, or?
No, just a big thanks team. Yeah, we're gathering feedback and information here, right? We don't have it all figured out. So this is a great opportunity for us to have some conversation, for us to share what we're thinking, and just appreciate folks giving us feedback and asking good questions. And yeah, if other things occur to you after this meeting, come back in, what is it, a couple weeks, and or reach out as needed. So just thanks so much. Thanks, team. Great job.
Awesome. Appreciate that. Right. With that, we'll go ahead and stop the recording and say thank you again for attending on that, and look forward to connecting with our HEC partners as we both go down this avenue of workforce. So, all righty.